स्पॉटलाइट में फिर से आपका स्वागत है। मैं हूं आपकी होस्ट अमीता। Like always, tune into Spotlight to listen to guests who will share their success stories and inspire all of us. आज हमारे साथ स्टूडियो में है वो हस्ती who is well known in the Canadian economic and policy making circles for India-based strategies and who has made a huge contribution to various educational institutions, corporations, not-for-profit organizations, and also the government as well. Currently, he is the Senior Advisor for India to Bennett Jones, a member of the Government of Saskatchewan's Asia Advisory Council, and also the current VP of the Asia Pacific Foundation in Toronto. It is no wonder he is the spokesperson for next week's Toronto Community Reception for the Indian Prime Minister. It is an honor and a pleasure to talk to him. Welcome to Spotlight, Mr. KASI RAO.
Thank you very much for having me here.
Kasi, it's exciting to know that you have been around the globe. I hear you have grown up in Ottawa, grown up in Moscow, India, back to Canada for education and university. So the viewers would like to know a little bit about your upbringing.
Thank you. Like many, I perhaps am part of the generation of global Indians and global Canadians. I'm a son of a former IFS officer. I was born in Ottawa, grew up in Moscow, as you noted, and then in Gangtok in Sikkim, which at that time was still a protectorate of India, but now is a part of India. And then Bangalore, Delhi. I came back to Canada 35 years ago for my higher education. And in different capacities have stayed in Canada over the last 35 years. It's of course a great honor, as you noted, the event taking place next week. And for me, it's an opportunity, as it is for many members of the Indo-Canadian community, to connect the richness of our past, the promise of the future with the present. And I think next week represents the present.
Very well said. You have a BA in Political Science from the University of Waterloo and an MA from the University of Toronto. And you have served on many high positions in banks, in universities, and in the automotive industry. But what inspired you to get into the political arena with the Government of Canada?
Like, I think, many people who came to Canada years ago, this was a very welcoming country. It provided opportunities. And I think in the case of education, it is to this day the single best equalizer we have in society. And for a country like Canada, which welcomed immigrants and gave us opportunities, I had the privilege of studying at amongst two of Canada's finest institutions, i.e. the University of Waterloo and then the University of Toronto. And so that then opened up all kinds of possibilities in terms of opportunities in government, in the financial sector, in policy making, at the University of Toronto itself, with which I still have very deep connections and ties with. So all of that happened, and then about 10 years ago, as the India file was ramping up and gathering international attention, I felt that I had to be a part of it in my own modest way, and so here I am 10 years later and being a part of this fabulous journey. And I think it speaks to the interest that is now omnidirectional. Virtually any sector you look at in society in Canada, they all have a connection to India or an India strategy in the making. And so when I saw some of this happening 10 years ago, I simply wanted to be a part of it and continue to be a part of it.
So very interesting that you brought about the omnidirectional part of what's happening with the Canada-India file. So tell us a bit more about that. So having been involved in it for a while, what are some of the things that is changing? I know IT was big in the past, but what is different now with the Canada-India file?
I think you're right. When it started, it started as an IT story. And if you cast your mind back to the early 90s, it was then, about the emerging Y2K phenomena in which India played a huge part in frankly, addressing the globe's problems. But increasingly, it has migrated well beyond the IT story. So even within the IT sector, it's moved from sort of the low end to the medium and the higher end. But I think more interestingly, you see this in broad sectors of society, and whether it is, companies or organizations in different parts of Canada, all of them now are developing India strategies. So if you take the Port of Halifax, they're looking at their shipping lanes and how to move commodities from the Canadian Midwest to that part of the world. I think if you look at the National Youth Orchestra of Canada, which 2 years ago took very talented young Canadians to India to train with young Indian students, and then gave a joint performance in Bengaluru together.
Wow.
You're seeing that. I think a number of higher education institutions have got what I would simply call as the brain chain, doing research and development projects with their counterparts in India. You look at the University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, University of Alberta, amongst Canada's leading institutions. They've got a terrific initiative with India. You look at Canadian colleges, whether it's Seneca, and if you look at other universities like Ryerson, phenomenal activity with the Bombay Stock Exchange on the next generation of entrepreneurs. So to me, what you now experience is a multi-pronged approach to India, which is so welcome. And I would say that, even in my capacity at the Asia Pacific Foundation, there's a general recognition amongst Canadians that the center of gravity has moved from, if you will, the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific, in which a country like India is a very important country to focus on. And so even within Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, we have a number of different India-related initiatives that have been launched and studies that are coming out to basically get the attention of more and more Canadians from different parts of society to train their attention on this relationship.
Very interesting. So the Canada-India file is going places, and what's happening next week is almost like an icing on the cake.
It is a fantastic event that we are planning for. The exciting part is, typically when you have a head of state coming to a country, they do bilateral meetings, they do business meetings, and all of those obviously are very, very important. What makes this visit unique in many ways is that the Prime Minister of India is going to be directly addressing members of the Indo-Canadian community and what I would simply call as the Friends of India, which is a growing band of well-wishers and followers of the Canada-India space. So that's taking place at Ricoh Coliseum on April 15th, on the evening of April 15th. Unlike the event in Madison Square Garden, which was on a Sunday, this is on a weekday, so it's an evening event. We will be opening doors at 3:30 to facilitate the proper entry of the registrants. There will be obviously a security protocol which will have to be respected, and that will be part of the process. But our plans really is to make it a historic experience for both the people in the audience, some 8,000 or so, as well as those who will be watching it on television. And there are some discussions right now underway on how we make the technology available for broadcast feeds and the like. But the simple idea is that it gives a chance for members of the community to hear directly, in this case, from the Prime Minister of India. Community members for the longest time have been the bridge builders in the Canada-India space, and that is why we're making this event free. It is a ticketed event. Of course, it's a ticketed event, but it's a free event in the sense that there's no charge for it. We're obviously seeking support from individuals and other supporters to raise the money for it, and that's happening in full earnest. But that's sort of the long and short of it. Once people get in, they will experience a cultural program which will blend the best of Canadian talent as it relates to Indian culture. And we're also pleased to say that we've got Indian talent by way of Sukhwinder, who will be at Ricoh Coliseum as well on April 15th.
So we're staying true to the Indian culture in terms of bringing in some entertainment as well. But Mr. Narendra Modi himself is a great speaker, as we saw from the Madison Squire talk. And this, like we were talking about in the earlier segment, is coming along the ways of the Canada-India file being expanded, as Mr. Modi is here to talk to the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, for, furthering the relations between Canada and India. So I wanted to ask you, yes, the reception gives the community an opportunity to see the man in power in action. But what do you think is the significance of his actual visit to Canada for both Canadians and the Indians?
I think at two levels. I think if we start with the event itself, it will be a substantial address. We expect an address of 40 to 50 minutes if we take past experience as a guide. So I think, one, it's a direct message from the Prime Minister of India in terms of the changes that are taking place in India. And because he commands a majority government, the prospects for reform look real. So whatever he has to say on all of those issues, I think, one, it's a direct medium. Second, I think, as you noted, this is a moment in time. It's a transformational moment. It's the first bilateral visit in over 4 decades. And while there have been other visits in the context of multilateral settings, G20 and the like, this really is the first bilateral opportunity for Canada-India relations to move to a completely different plank, a higher level. And what makes this visit so special is that while we've had so many interactions from various sectors of society with India, this visit allows us to crystallize it into one visit, and in this case, into one event. And the interest we're receiving is a reflection of that, both from community members, from what I call as the bridge builders in the Canada-India space, that is, people who trace their roots to India, from the Friends of India, who come from the cultural space, who come from the business arena, who come from the policy arena. We're seeing that interest. And the fact that you have an Indian Prime Minister in a very short period of time, in a vast country like this, touching on official Canada, i.e. Ottawa, Toronto, one of the most diverse multicultural cities in the world, and then proceeding all the way out west to Vancouver. And I think that's remarkable that all of this is taking place in less than 72 hours in terms of the duration of his visit.
Yeah, no, it is definitely going down in history as something significant, and we are looking forward to what is going to happen between Canada and India. And from what you're saying, it sounds like a good prospect. They also talk about the relationship between Canada and India being like a brain chain instead of a brain drain. I think you've addressed it a little bit, but what do you think? What do they mean by brain chain?
I think a number of things. One is India itself is in the midst of a rapid transformation in terms of how it looks at its knowledge agenda, its higher education agenda. And I think when you think of the demographics of India, that almost 50% are under the age of 25. Unlike many countries in the world, India will continue to be a young country while the rest of the world ages, even countries in Asia that have this demographic challenge. So for this demographic dividend that India has, knowledge and higher education become vital. And by that I mean not just universities, but in the context of its universities agenda, its research agenda, as well as its skills agenda, its vocational training agenda. For that, India will look to the world for partnerships. And this is where Canada already has stepped in, already has come in. And what this visit will do is will give it a sharper focus for the years to come. So whether it's on important issues of global relevance, on the research and development agenda, or on the skills and vocational training agenda, I think Canada will be very much a willing partner. It already is, but I think this will take it again to a higher level.
I do have to mention, though, about the Madison Squire gathering that happened for him back in September 2014.
भारत माता की
was treated like a rock star. Why do you think it is so beyond it just being bridging that relationship between Canada and India? Beyond that, why was he being treated as a rock star in your opinion?
I think you have alluded to the Madison Square Garden event. The appeal, I believe, lies in 2 or 3 things. Number one is that he's obviously a gifted communicator, a gifted orator, and that shows in the way he speaks. I think the second is that both the simplicity of his message and the openness with which he is willing to tackle the socioeconomic challenges facing India, I think is very much a part of his appeal, which resonates with, I would say, India watchers around the world, and particularly with members of the diaspora and the community in particular. Mm-hmm. And the third reason I would say is the prospects for reform look so real because it's the first majority government in a generation and a half in India. And so the sense that what he says, and given his reputation as somebody who gets things done, looks a lot more surer. And so whether you look at the tabling of the recent budget or other initiatives that have taken place, the smart money around the world is now, relooking and rethinking its India strategy in earnest. And of course, it helps a lot that the growth projections are now in excess of 7% again in India. So that's the combination of personal leadership, institutional leadership, the willingness to tackle its challenges in a far more open manner, I think all of that resonates, and then combined with a majority government and with growth projections, make again India, I believe, strategically very, very relevant in the coming decades.
So in short, he is real, and that's why people find that a trust that they can put in him, and they see real outcomes.
And I think in the case of Canada, what makes it special is he's perhaps the first Indian Prime Minister to have had significant contact with the Canadian political leadership, as well as members of the Indo-Canadian community, as well as business leaders, even before he has formally set foot on Canadian soil. And in that sense, he is not a stranger to Canada, if I can put it that way.
Okay, very well said. So yes, that event is going to be rocking as well. Now, I have to say, we have been talking for a bit here, and I'm very inspired by how much you're doing for the community and bringing us globally together. So you're a rock star in your own right with all your involvements and achievements. We are very proud of it. Now, beyond that though, what the viewers would like to know, is there, Mr. KASI Rao, beyond what you do, as we heard about, you, your family, your hobbies, is there, Mr. KASI Rao, behind all this?
Look, like many generations of Canadians who trace their roots actually around the world and who call this great country home, I have the privilege, in my case, of tracing my roots to India. And what I think India has taught us, and what this country, Canada, has given us the opportunity, is really to blend the best of both those experiences. And you're now seeing, especially if you go to Canadian universities and colleges, you see this next generation of what I would simply call as global Canadians, who trace their roots to many parts of the world, and of course, who take great pride in the case of those who trace their roots to India, as to how they connect with the society they live in and the society where they draw their roots from. And I think in that sense, I am part of many, hundreds of thousands of people who've had that great, extraordinary privilege of being part of two great countries. I would say in terms of personal interests and the like, whether it's in sports or whether it's tennis or whether it is, playing Scrabble with the family and kids, I'm no different than any number of Canadians in that regard. But what makes, I think, the event next week special, as I said, is it is one of those unique moments in life where you get to connect your past, your present, and the promise of the future in the Canadian-Indian relationship. And for those of us who are part of all of this, I think it's a singular honor to be a part of it.
Very well said. Well, KASI, it was a great honor to talk to you today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us and inspiring all of us and enlightening us on what's happening on the horizon with the Canada-India file. And we wish you all the best for next week's event and all the upcoming projects that you have on board.
Thank you, and I think our periodic updates will be on our website, pmmodivisit.ca, which is how we're using as our medium of communicating to the number of inquiries we are receiving.
Yeah.
And thank you for this opportunity.
All the best.
Thank you.
तो ये थे मिस्टर काशी राव, जिन्होंने हमें सिखाया है कि even a single individual with his or her hard work and passion can make a change in the community and also globally. Well, that's a wrap for this week's show. Continue to follow us on Facebook and Twitter or write to me at vjamithaspotlight@gmail.com. We will continue to bring you inspiring guests. Until next week, this is Amitha signing off, but encouraging you to be the change towards the change in yourself and towards the change in your community.